So that takes us into how to respond. So basically, this is the 4 C's approach: connect, correct, challenge, and convince. Right. So the reason why we use this is more like, in a sense, like, I'm sure you'll make it your own. Like when you go and talk to non-Muslims and they kind of raise these issues, yeah, you'll make it your own. And inshallah, in Nanas will talk about this. We'll have a workshop where we go into more detail as to how you can use this for any kind of issue. So firstly, establish connection, right? So the purpose of this is that we as Muslims do not like innocent people being killed. This is a fact. As Muslims, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a consciousness about human life, we are actually the most sensitive people on the planet when it comes to the death of innocent people. Because we understand there's akhirah. We understand that these people are going to be resurrected. And when we read about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see that he was very worried about the future of his people, right? He was very worried about the future of people, and that he was stricken with grief that they won't accept Islam, right? So in a sense that we as Muslims are most sensitive when it comes to human life, right? So when someone raised that issue about innocent people being killed for X, Y, Z reason, it's a problem for us, right? It's a problem for that, and you can connect on that purpose, right? The issue we have really is a selective outrage, right? Like the issue is they just care about Paris and not about Syria, right? So but the problem is not that they care about people in Paris, right? In the sense that we want people to accept Islam, and they can't accept Islam if they're dead, right? This is like our mission for Dawah and getting people into Islam. Encompass that we recognize human life, and we recognize that it's something sanctified. Right? And that takes me to my next thing, is to correct their understanding of Islam. And we always use this ayah over and over again, and anything happens, and the masjids unanimously tell everyone that we don't believe in the death of innocent life. But you should take that and explain that to the people. Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in the Quran and explained that how if you take one innocent life, it's as if you kill all of humanity. In a sense that for us, though I'm not using the term in the political sense, but in a sense every death of one person is a genocide for us, right? So we have a very high standard when it comes to taking care of the affairs of human beings. We shall explain that the rules of war in Islam, as outlined by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, don't torture, don't kill innocent babies, don't kill women and children, don't kill the old, don't burn trees, right? So these are detailed kind of rules, right? Then explain, like, why did we become Muslim? Like, most of us here, unless we're descendants of, the Muhajirin or the Ansar, and I don't think anyone here is, maybe there is some people, but I'm just saying, hypothetically, all of us became Muslims because Muslims invaded our countries, right? And they ruled us by Islam, right? If this caricature that they present, would you accept Islam from like the way of life of that person? Like, how many people in Iraq are going to accept the way of life of the Americans based on how they've been treated by the Americans, right? So there was a justice, there was a concern, there was a care that was given by that. So for example, like we know when the Sahaba went into present-day Syria, Sham, they had initially collected the jizya, right? And then when they realized that the Romans were outnumbering them, they refunded the jizya, right? They refunded the tax. The Christians were shocked. They were shocked that the kind of justice would be there in any kind of civilization, right? That was let alone taking safeguarding human life. That was to be safeguarding the wealth of people. Then ask them about what about all the Christians who live in Muslim lands, right? If it was really about killing Christians, how come there's one Christian in Egypt, one Christian in Lebanon, one Christian, one Hindu in India, right? Like, Muslims ruled all these territories. If it was about massacring innocent people, non-Muslims, well, there'd be no non-Muslims in our countries, right? And then you can bring about Greece, right? Greece, the Greek people were ruled by the Ottomans for hundreds of years, right? We didn't hand out disease blankets to them like the way that the Europeans handed out to the natives, right? And it's an important contrast. This is something that is called archaeological evidence. It's not historical evidence, because you can go into Greece right now and you can see the Greek people are still there, to still have their cultural intact. You live here in an era that used to be ruled by another people that are completely annihilated, right? So you can compare and contrast. Really, is that, we didn't treat them the way the Europeans treated the natives here, right? Obviously, they're still alive. Right? And then the challenge. Challenge is this outrage about innocent life, right? And what is really absurd about the coverage of Syria is the massive killer in Syria is the secular, politicized, secular. Bashar al-Assad, he's the one butchering and massacring the people, right? You want to talk about a propaganda system, how about that? Most people, I bet you if you polled them, they would think ISIS is a bigger killer, right, in Syria than Bashar al-Assad, the way it's covered, right? They think that the evil in Syria is ISIS, not Bashar al-Assad. But he's killed between 180,000 and 250,000. The 250,000 number comes from the Washington Post. But you can see in the graphic, you can't even see the lines when it comes to the other groups of how many innocent people they've killed, right? ISIS doesn't even register in that graphic, right? So, but the question is what is the outrage over? Is it over innocent life? Then why do people care about the fact that the equivalent of Oakville has been wiped off the face of planet Earth, right? Then what about the invasion of Iraq? 500,000 people just gone, right? Just in these two things alone, it's like 1 million people that have been killed, but nothing, no outrage, right? So is this really about human life? Is your outrage really about the loss of innocent life, or is it just really you just don't like Islam, right? Is that really the thing that's going on? I mean, you have to talk about it in a way that makes sense to your person you're talking to. If you want to bring it close to home, what about the 70,000 people dying each year from cancer? How come that's not covered in the press the way that when one guy shoots up Parliament is covered? Isn't this relevant? Don't these 70,000 Canadian families who are going to grieve over their loss of loved ones, don't they matter? Why is their death worth less? This is an epidemic. Cancer is an epidemic in Canada. If it's the leading cause of death, and we're not talking about it, it's not on the front page cover, do you think anything's going to happen about it? Why aren't the billions of dollars that they spend on foreign policy spent on this instead? And the numbers are very similar when you look at America. It's proportionally very similar for the size of the population. Diabetes and cancer, all the top 10 things. One of the biggest causes of death in Canada is suicide. 3,000 people. People always quote the number of people that died in New York is roughly that number. Why isn't that an issue? They mobilize armies to destroy 2 countries for that. Well, why don't you take care of suicides here in Canada? And then convey. The last point is to convey Islam, right? Through the intellectual proofs of Islam, right? And you might say that's kind of strange. Why would you want to talk to them? They're coming to you and they're saying Muslims are terrorists, or they want to talk to you because they see this. They're worried, they're concerned, and they're talking to you about that. But really, the interesting thing is that they're actually open. When they come to talk to you about an issue, they've actually crossed a big taboo in Canadian culture, which is you don't talk about religion and politics. So they want answers. They're open. They've broken through that one cultural barrier, and they're actually open to discuss, right? If you look at, for example, think about Umar bin al-Khattab. Why was he going to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That journey that ended up being when he became Muslim. Why was he going on his way to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It was to kill him, right? When Sa'd bin Mu'adh, when he was going to talk to Musab bin Umair in Medina, he was going to throw him out. He's the equivalent of a Trump. In his mindset, when you look at him, he was a xenophobe. He's I want the Muslims out of my country. Right? That's when he was talking over there to go and talk to them. So these two incidents, you can see just because someone has negative understanding of Islam, it shouldn't be I shouldn't just discount. If they're willing to talk, we're willing to talk to anybody. Right? So that's just an important thing. So the thing is to discuss the proofs, is to take the conversation and eventually discuss the proofs. So talk about why we believe in Islam, mention how it's rationally believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the need for messengers, and prove that the Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, this topic is a lecture and a discussion unto its own, and we can, inshallah, if you're interested, we can arrange something. But basically, this is where the conversation should go. And obviously, the question is how? How do we open this up, right? How do you go from talking about Muslims killing people to discussing that? And what it is to raise the bigger questions of society. Remember I said about how Islam answers those questions we have about life? Is to talk about that. Talk about, what is the nature of society? Really, I found this graph. In America, between 2004 and 2013, 300,000 people, over 300,000 people have been killed in gun violence. And in that same period, about 313 have been killed because of terrorism. The question is why were these innocent people killed so violently in America, right? Because really the thing is that the culture of violence that permeates the society, whether it's America going in and killing Iraqis over lies, that they said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and he didn't. Or it's these people, like, who taught them that you should take a gun and go shoot somebody, whether it's suicide or murder, like, who taught them that violence, right? Because it's not coming from Muslims in Islam, right? These people are, if you discount it by one. All these incidents, most of them, they're just Americans who are just shooting each other or themselves, right? Because a lot of people kill themselves with a gun through suicide. So the question is that really to ask the person, where does this come from? And is to really question the liberal democratic society. Is it freedom? This idea about freedom, that you can do whatever you want, that there's no responsibility, right? That's where you can contrast it to that it wasn't this way under Islam, right? And you can talk about concepts of accountability, like how Islam, accountability is different. Like you can talk about the Sahabas and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how they view their accountability. Even something like fard, like the concept of fard, the idea of an obligation is something that's completely alien to the liberal society. It's completely alien. Like when I do dawah to non-Muslims, one of the things I ask them is that and this was during the time of Harper, is that if Harper told you to do push-ups at 5 o'clock in the morning, would you? And the guy's like, obviously, he says, no. But don't we get up to pray Fajr at especially in the summer at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning? Right? Like this is the concept of accountability. Like we're accountable. Like no one's putting a gun to our head to pray or anything. Like, we do that out of our own, obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Can you imagine that this kind of concept once upon a time was governing societies, right? And what you can do is contrast how when Umar bin Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, how he invaded Iraq to the US invasion of Iraq, right? Like you can talk about when Muslims invaded Iraq, what happened? Baghdad became one of the centers of learning in the world, right? It became like non-Muslims used to travel there to learn. Just like Muslims now travel to Harvard to learn. Non-Muslims used to travel to Baghdad to learn. And it became the capital for 500 years, right? When Muslims ruled Baghdad and Iraq, it became part of the society. Like that, what I'm trying to get at is that people understood Islam as a meritocracy, like as something that is about merit in terms of, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the best of you are those who are the best in terms of taqwa, right? It's not that you're not an Arab, you're not this, that, It was that if you're a good Muslim, then you raised to prominence in the Islamic society. Now we can contrast that to under the US invasion. And when I was preparing this presentation, I was actually shocked. And I guess I should be because it's really a presentation about propaganda. But I talked to a couple brothers and they have no idea about how the US used depleted uranium in Iraq. Depleted uranium, just to give you a little bit of context what depleted uranium is, like, when they talk about the enriched uranium, when you're making a nuclear reactor, there's something called enriched uranium, which is what you need to do that. So if you have about 8 pounds of uranium, 1 pound is enriched and 7 pounds is a depleted uranium, meaning that radioactive material has been reduced. It's still there, but it's been reduced, right? And that enriched uranium is what goes into reactors. But the depleted uranium is what ends up on bullets and like anti-tank weapons, right? So like they'll coat the projectiles with this material. And the effect has been a dramatic increase in birth defects and cancers and other kind of diseases in Iraq. If you go home, and I encourage you to do this, I just was afraid there was children in the crowd, so I didn't put these images here. I didn't want to scare them. It's horrific when you see like children born with 6 fingers, 6 toes, right, because of the radiation poisoning that they're getting. And then American soldiers themselves are coming home sick with this stuff. They call it Gulf War syndrome from the 1991, but they also used it in 2003, right? So this what's sitting in this quote was an American soldier who he had 5,000 times the amount of radiation in his body than he should have because of when he was cleaning up this depleted uranium and things like that. And there have been cases when American soldiers come home because what they used to do is they used to steal the stuff they caught, but that stuff was all covered with depleted uranium dust. So they'd come home, the kids would die, their wife, their spouses would die, they'd go crazy and just start shooting people, like they go mentally insane because of this stuff. So this is what they used in Iraq. This is what they used, and they used other places like Serbia and things like that. But But that's the type of governance that they brought to Iraq. Can you imagine what our brothers and sisters go through when they give birth to someone so, and please go home and please look this up, depleted uranium in Iraq, and you can see the horrors that our brothers and sisters face in Afghanistan and Iraq because of this. There was the source is Lorraine Moray, and I met another brother at downtown in Toronto who also works on these kind of activist issues. So I'm not sure if she was involved with the Manhattan Project itself, but she was involved with some kind of nuclear government research. So you can look up if you need extra resources on that. Politically, they're looking to divide Iraq. So under Islam, Baghdad became the capital of the whole state. Under Western rule, they're cutting it up into 3 useless states. As I mentioned, they are the ones who created the animosity between the Sunni and the Shia. They resisted for a long time, but then what happened is what happened. And that happened to that. So they broke up that. They made the Kurds independent a long time ago, right? In the no-fly zone over there. So that's what they're doing to Iraq. So under Islam, Baghdad became the capital of the whole Khilafah. And under them, it's become 3 useless statelets, which is obviously easier to control. I mean, that's the point, right? This map here is something, it's called Blood Borders, where they have a map. It was published, I think, approximately around 2006. I encourage you all to look at that. It's how they're going to cut up the Muslim world. Like America wants to redesign the map that was created by the Europeans to reflect its image, right? They want to cut up the Muslims into even more, so we have more difficulty in terms of uniting. So then you have to link the thought of accountability and all that to the belief, and that's how you can get back into the proofs and say, well, this is why we believe. Like in a sense, like why as Muslims do we pray Fajr in a sense like that? If you want to go back to that, what is it about that convinces us about Islam? Because you have to remember that these people, most of them have a Christian background. And Christianity, if you read the Bible or you're familiar with Christians, is very irrational, right? And so when you talk to them about Islam, they just think that you're just a different term form at best, a different Christian, or it's just as irrational because most Canadians are secular. So you have to kind of break them out of that and show them how Islam is actually a rational belief. So it just in terms of closing, connect. So the point of this is to establish a connection. This person's open, they've crossed that line, that taboo in society says don't talk about religion politics. Work with that. Don't dismiss them. Don't dismiss their feelings. This is when someone innocent dies, they might have been to Paris. Like a lot of, especially if they're rich, they've been to go Paris, they might have seen that thing, they might have gone to that concert hall, right? Or they might have gone to San Bernardino, they might have relatives there. Don't dismiss it. Like we are furious when the fact that they don't recognize when the Zionist army goes in to slaughter Palestinian children, we're furious that they don't recognize that our loss is real, right? So we should, in a sense that we are better than that, right? We're Muslims, Allah guided us, and so therefore we have to recognize that when they feel pain, it's something legitimate. Correct their understanding of Islam. Use this time to correct their understanding of Islam, right? Show them that Islam is not that. Use the archaeological proofs, right? And explain it as an archaeological proof. It's not just something written in history, it's something you can audit yourself. Challenge their understanding. Are you really concerned about innocent thing? Then why aren't you concerned about this, and that? Why aren't you concerned about the native women that are being killed in Manitoba? No one talks about that, right? Convey. And then use the opportunity to actually talk to them about Islam and Islamic belief and try to convert that conversation. What I would recommend is that when you have that conversation, say, hey, Jim, do you want to go for coffee? When are you free next? This is an important discussion. We should discuss it over dinner. When are you free to go over for dinner, right? So, because it can be tricky, especially when you're discussing this in a workplace or in an environment, especially when they're emotionally charged. Book appointment right there on the spot, send them a Google invite or whatever it is, but book a dinner with them and then talk to them about the proofs and explain why Islam is the truth and take the conversation there, inshallah. So, inshallah, this is going to talk about the workshop, and then we'll come back for questions on